Good evening to you wherever you are watching me from. And in this video, I would be explaining what should be included when you are writing the background for your study in your research work. I will also address the issues that are related to gaps, the types of research gap that we have and how to fill them. Like I said, this particular video is related more to the chapter 1 of your write-up, which is the introduction. Now, I said the chapter 1 of an academic thesis, often titled Introduction, serves as the foundational sections that orients readers to the research by establishing one context. So the first role your background will play is to actually orient your readers to your research by establishing the context. When you say gender studies in the developing nations, you will know that it is in the context of male and female. But in some other nations that are a bit liberal, you will notice that it goes beyond those two categorization. Justifying the study, it will give us the justification. Why is this study important? Why is it necessary? What are we going to miss if we don't have this study, given the existing body of knowledge? Number 3, it will outline the structure of the research. So typically following a standard 5-chapter format common in formal research studies, it is very, very critical. So it reviews the expected headings and contents to provide an overview for planning, topic identification, big picture of your research study, setting the stage for subsequent chapter on literature review, methodology, result, and discussion. When we are reading your background or introduction, which is your chapter 1, we should have information on the type of methodology you will likely use. So you can see that it's very, very fundamental. And looking at this, I have provided a kind of structure to the background, as it were. The first part components, there are different approaches, but based on your institutional approach, there will be peculiarities, but these particular issues will be there. The first one is the background overview. In this, you introduce the topic. You will let us know the broader context of the topic and the relevance to the field. So the purpose is that you have a big picture and you have a motivation for the study. The next thing is the problem statement. It could be under the background, it could have a separate headline. So it in that place we will identify the research gap. I'm going to deal with that at the later part of this video. So what we are dealing with is that we are trying to highlight what prior works lacks, often through gaps in previous study. So your problem statement should highlight what is lacking in prior study. Next to this is the purpose statement. Clearly the research aims, is clear to everyone. So this defines the study objective and scope. The next thing is the research question or hypothesis. So the list specific question or testable predictions. So this guides the reader on what the study seeks to answer. The variables will be clear. So we have the justification or significance, and this is to explain the contribution and importance of the study. So the value of that study to the existing theory, existing practice, existing policy. For instance, let's say somebody who invented or pioneered minimal invasive surgical procedure for goiter, let me put it like that, in medical sciences. And the significance and justification could be that some patients who are gone through under the knife, they have suffered voice loss and some other complications. But if there is minimal invasion, so you are demonstrating the value, then overview of the methodology as you are describing within, it provides a roadmap without full elaboration. We know that you want to test something, you want to survey, and all of those things. So these particular headlines are the structure that is usually provided in the background of the study. So I want to quickly deal with what you have to do within your background. You have to first establish territory, niche, and occupy it. This diagram illustrates a three-step process for establishing a territory, a niche, and occupying it, and presenting it in a flow chart. And you can see establishing a territory requires you to review prior research concerning what you are doing. This section is not a literature review per se, but it is actually the part of your research work that will provide information that you are grounded in the current practices and what is obtainable in that field. For instance, if somebody is writing about out-of-school children, he has to review prior research so that we will know that the person is grounded in the existing knowledge of that particular field. And it is in this territory establishment you would actually create a niche for yourself. That means creating a niche for yourself require you to indicate the gap. So what is now undone that you want to do? What is the research void? What is the weaknesses? For instance, let's say somebody is in psychology of education and the person wants to develop an instrument that will measure attitude for children that are below 4 to 6. So it will begin to establish your niche. You will begin to indicate the fault lines, maybe the existing instruments for attitude to mathematics are merely adopted or adapted. They are not specifically designed for those children in that age. So when you have established your niche, people will know that that is the value you are adding to theory, to practice, and to knowledge. Then you occupy the niche, you state the purpose, you outline the methods as well as the contribution. So when you are writing in an educational research, you have to start with the global context. Let your reader know the global context as regards maybe out of school children, maybe exclusive breastfeeding, maybe the students' performance in grammar or science or mathematics. The next thing you have to do is to provide a theoretical perspective, a national context after the global context. You provide a theoretical perspective. After that, you begin to give us the empirical evidence. So within 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I have shown here, you are actually, in the last slide, I said review prior research, establishing territory. So when you are finished establishing territory through 1, 2, 3, 4, you will now begin to identify gaps, and you will now begin to stress local educational concern. Let's assume you are doing educational research. The next thing is to have a broad scientific field. Let's say you are doing a science research. It could be a broad scientific field. Then you will begin to mention specific system, material, or phenomenon. Then you also go to look at the established knowledge, and you will begin to consider the scientific limitation. Maybe the process of doing that thing is energy consuming. And the unresolved question is that what can we do to reduce the amount of energy for that particular extraction? So it could be the methodology used, and you will begin to justify the need for your present study. For example, let's say somebody who is writing about catalysis study in chemistry. The first thing the person consider is the importance of catalysis in industry, and the metal oxides are the major catalyst that is always used. And after that, the person will begin to give a narrative of the known catalytic mechanism. And when he now gets there, he will now go to talk about the limitation in temperature. Maybe the current study has talked about, they have not focused much on limitation in temperature. Then we begin to talk about lack of kinetic modeling under variable pressure for that particular catalytic reaction. And finally, it will begin to talk about need for mechanistic clarification if the person is in the core sciences. But I will give vivid example for those people in education and social sciences as we go on. So we are now in the section of research gap. So research gap is also called knowledge gaps, and they are areas where existing literature falls short in addressing specific questions. It could be question, it could be methodology, it could be context, it could be theoretical underpinning, it could be constraining reliable judgments about research subjects. And it is not possible to do this without rigorous academic review, from systematic analysis, prior study, revealing patterns of evidence, theoretical, methodological, contextual. It could be population. For instance, now, let's say there's a new mode of family planning in nursing or health research, and it has not been tested in Nigeria. So that's context and population. Practical population in gaps, which is collective guide, future investigation, and all of that. So research gap is that untouched and unexplored territory. And I want to talk about the types that we have. The first one is the knowledge gap. This is the most straightforward gap. It is when a particular topic or phenomenon hasn't yet been studied. And before you make a claim about knowledge gap, you must give a caveat. For instance, you are doing a research in Ibadan, and somebody has done that research in Port Harcourt, but it is not online. It is not published online. It is a research that is in a final year project somewhere. Before you claim something is a knowledge gap, you also have to let your readers be aware that it is based on online literature search. Because if researches are limited to when there was stable research, They share information through journal publications that are on the table and the ones you could access. So you can say for the available information. So it is very important is that what makes something knowledge gap is that a knowledge gap exists when there is insufficient empirical evidence or theoretical understanding to answer a clear question and compare alternatives or make confident recommendation, often because the topic is new, methods are underdeveloped, and undeveloped or long-term data are missing. Look at this example in an education research. How virtual reality impacts engagement in STEM learning. This is a knowledge gap because virtual reality in education is relatively new and we lack comprehensive studies on its long-term effects on student motivation, retention, conceptual understanding across different ages and groups and subjects. So this is a knowledge gap in education. If you are doing a medical science research, you can have knowledge research where we have this is a knowledge gap, long-term effect of molecular RNA vaccine on immune system memory. You know, it is important we see that this is a knowledge gap because mRNA vaccine technology is recent. In fact, we need more longitudinal study to understand how immune memory develop and persist over years in different populations. And it will be impossible for me to give you examples in all fields, but with this context, you could apply it. So it's not limited to this. It could be focusing on funding, shape of research agenda, help in parallel studies that will improve theory and policy. The next is the evidence or empirical gap. For example, we already have information about a theory, but what happened is that the explanation available to support the conclusion of that theory is either insufficient, inconsistent, or low quality data to support confident conclusion. So an evidence gap exists when existing research cannot reliably answer a clear question because of missing data, poor external validity, conflicting results, or lack of rigorous method of in terms of mounting the research. For example, in an education research, we can have evidence gap on limited longitudinal data on the effectiveness of personalized learning. Let's say personalized learning has been advanced as a method of teaching and learning, but we have scattered study on that one, and we don't know, there is no study that has actually give us a longitudinal dimension whereby a particular student are using that personalized learning over a period that is long. So this limits guidance for policymaker because they just know short-term effect of that thing, but there is no empirical data for a long-term effect. So that is an empirical gap. We can also have insufficient replications of study on social media impact on adolescent mental health. Look at this. I wrote there. Let's say this is the gap you have identified. You could write that while many studies show correlations between the adolescent mental health and social media, we lack rigorous large sample replication study that can establish causality and identify mechanism across the cultural context and age group. Without replication and experimental design, effects, sizes, and directions remain uncertain. So you can see now that the evidence is that something is already going on, but we have not actually tested it in a particular way. Look at in nursing research, we can say conflicting evidence on optimal patient to nurse ratio for quality care outcome. You know, for example, there are studies on staffing levels and the quality of care outcomes, but there are limited high quality multi-site data from diverse healthcare settings and patient population to create a universal applicable staffing recommendations. So what has been done is not enough for us to conclude because it's done in small places, although there is a theory explaining that that particular thing that we are discussing is relevant. The next thing is that filling evidence gap is critical for evidence based on practice because reliable and general clinical decisions, improving educational investment, improving allocation of resources differently, to mention a few. So the next gap that you can fill is what we call the theoretical or conceptual gap. These gaps occur when there are no well-developed models or framework to explain, to predict or guide research and practice for a phenomenon. Without a coherent theory, findings remain fragmented and it's hard to generalize. For example, when we are dealing with the user acceptability model of technology and so many other ones, you know, for instance, we can have lack of unified framework, multiple competing definitions and measurement, no standard model to unify research. You know, we can have missing explanatory model, no mechanism described to explain, observe relationship or causal pathway. We can have insufficient cross-domain theory. The theory from one field doesn't translate to the adjacent domain, you know. So concrete example is understanding what makes a good teacher. Many studies have given us several information, but there is no unified framework that we can say these are the specific teaching behaviors and personal traits that we can use to classify a teacher as a good one. Look at in health sciences, why some people get sick from COVID while others do not. So there could be no extensive research for it. We can say what causes happiness in modern life. So there are research that have done thing on money, relationship, health, but there is no integrated theory to explain the interactions of this factor and which combination matters most to different people. So your study can be in the area of addressing a theoretical or conceptual gap. I do not recommend this kind of gap for researchers who are yet to earn a PhD because it is rigorous, it is time consuming. When you want to do a work, you can do a evidence gap, you can do knowledge gap, but doing the gap related to this could be time consuming and it could be very demanding. This is methodology gaps, and this gap arise when research relies on limited or inappropriate method. That means how have they been carrying out data collection, data analysis concerning that subject? So your intention is to give a alternative of the method of data collection that has been used in the past. So you want to actually bring something new to the table. And those ones are very applicable in several researches in education, in core sciences, in nursing, and so much more. So when we have this kind of study, our focus could be mixing qualitative and quantitative approaches. It could be they have been doing it only in quantitative way. Let somebody do it in qualitative alone. It could be how to measure. It could be an integrated assessment tool creation. It could be producing a new instrument, So the methodology gaps are interested in producing a kind of result that will actually bring about what I can call a new way of doing that particular research. So look at in core science, there could be millimeter technique for studying deep ocean ecosystem. What I mean is that the marine biologists could have relied heavily on surface sampling and remote sensing, but lack advanced in situ method to directly observe and measure sea organisms and their interaction. That could be a way, and somebody wants to do it. It could be in nursing. We could have insufficient method for measuring patient holistic well-being. Nursing research focuses on vital signs and clinical outcome, but lack of integrated methodology to assess emotional, spiritual, social dimension of patient care. So it's very easy to get a research where thermometer was used to measure temperature, something to measure blood pressure and so on. But the emotional, spiritual, somebody can say, I want to do a scale to measure this. So filling this gap require methodological innovation, and you can use a new design, a new instrumentation, a multi-dimension tool. This is a very area that I recommend for people who are in counseling, nursing, sciences, analytical, chemistry, and so much more. It is doing things. It's also a methodological gap in medical sciences also. So the next gap that I will be talking about in this presentation, it is the contextual and population gap. The contextual and population gap, these gaps occur when research overlooks the important setting, region, phases, population, group, limiting the generalizability and equity of findings. So when a particular region has not experienced a particular method of doing things, the point is that it is very important that they are doing it. For instance, if all the things that has been done around AI in education is in rural school, or low is in the urban school, rich school, and the elite school, and we have nothing that is done that is in the area of schools that are in the inner city. So your contextual population gap could actually be focusing on that rural setting. Look at in core sciences, lack of study on extreme environmental organisms. Most biological research focuses on temperate zone organisms, but there is limited understanding of how life adapts and function in extreme environment like deep sea vents, polar region, or a high altitude ecosystem, a place where they have not studied that particular thing. Look at it in psychology. We could have an example that there is underrepresentation of non-Western population in mental health research. Most psychology studies are conducted on Western educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, which are called weird population, creating gaps in understanding mental health across diverse culture, context, and this contextual and population gap, they are good, but I will suggest that if you are doing a doctoral research, let it be an addition to other gaps. It's not good to just have a thesis to, most especially in behavioral sciences, to say it has not been done before in Nigeria. Along with other things, let's um, um, other things reflect the genuinity of the results of the finding. So the context and population gap require deliberate sampling, partnership with underrepresented community, and funding priority that support research across varied settings to produce equitable and applicable knowledge. You know, we could have untested theory gap, that means theory versus implementation. You know, for instance, these gaps has to do with when well supported theories never made a leap to routine practice. That means doing them and seeing what happened. Is just a claim that has not been tested. So courses include the cost infrastructure, professional training, policy incentive, institutional inertia. Closing this gap require implementing research, pilot program, cross-sector partnership to adapt theory into feasible reward. For example, in medicine now, we could have um, a real-world implementation of genetic research indicates personalized medicine theories lack real-world. So let's say we have a personalized medicine theory. So that theory has not been implemented. Um, the treatment should be tailored to individual genetic profile, but most hospitals and clinics still use one size fits all protocol because of costs and limited. So we want to make sure that that particular theory matches the existing. The next thing is sociology, uh, social capital theory, not applied in community development. So there is um, theories show how social capital theory talks about how social network and trust strengthen community. Yet, many development programs prioritize economic interventions and overlook relationship building. So, this is a very important in the social and behavioral settings research. We could also have the education growth mindset theory. That's a theory, but underutilized in classroom, so that we could test for it and seeing is working. So this work kind of gap is an attempt to bridge the gap between theory and practice. Um, Means of investing and implementing study, develop a scalable delivery models, training practitioner to mention a few. So this is the summary of the gap. We have the knowledge gap, we have the methodology gap, we have the evidence gap, we have the contextual gap, and I can say thank you for being part of this video. My name is Dr. Nathaniel Umilani, and you could reach us on our email and WhatsApp in the bio. Thank you very much. If you like this appearance, because the reason we are appearing like this is to actually make sure that we look like where we are from and not the Western. So I would love you to tell me whether you like it, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.